Johnny's IEP meeting is in 2 weeks. Fortunately, I have a process that makes collecting and documenting the data super efficient, so I am not stressed or overwhelmed by the pending due date. Here is the step-by-step process that leaves me feeling confident in every IEP I write, whether I've known a student for 3 years or 3 months. Step 1, survey the parents and teachers. A couple of weeks before the meeting, I email the parents and teachers a questionnaire, which is available in the resources section, to gather information about their child or student with a due date of next week. In an ideal world, the family and teacher return a completed questionnaire with relevant information I can include in the IEP. But oftentimes, we don't get them back or they are incomplete. If possible, I try to get the family on the phone and ask them questions prior to the meeting. The teacher's a little easier if we are on the same campus, as I can stop by and have a chat. If I haven't received the information prior to the meeting, then I bring the questionnaires to the meeting and ask the questions during that time. Step 2, review existing data. Because I have been using SLP Toolkit, I can easily view the data I have collected on Johnny's goals and review any notes that I have made. With our most recent update, this is going to be even easier. On the student dashboard, I can see a snapshot of any progress monitoring I've done, as well as session data. Johnny has mastered his language goals. I did make a note that he's got difficulty with story retell, so this will be an area that I want to assess. This data is great for quickly reporting progress on his goals, but without further information, it isn't really helpful in deciding his current strengths and needs for ongoing programming. That leads me to step 3, collect additional information. In SLP Toolkit, I will create a new annual review period for this upcoming IEP. If you are new to SLP Toolkit, there is a library of present-level assessments built into the app, which are informal screening measures designed to gather information about communication strengths and needs. There are grade-based assessments that include the language underpinnings required to access the curriculum for those grade levels. The articulation assessments cover all speech sounds in the initial, beginning, and ending position of a word. And then there are the pragmatic, functional communication, and classroom observations that are more of a checklist than an assessment and help to guide my thinking of all the skills I need to review. Johnny is near the end of 3rd grade, so I'm going to select the 3rd through 5th grade present level assessment. This is where your clinical judgment comes into play. If this is far too difficult, for example, you're flagging most items in the assessment, then I may elect to give him the 1st through 2nd grade PLA instead. At the top of each language-based present level assessment, there is a section to gather information for both language and narrative samples. Although I rarely conduct a thorough language sample like we were taught in grad school, goodbye SALT and type token ratio, I always complete a simple language sample as part of my assessment. This is where we get a ton of contextualized information. It's also going to help me rule out if I may need to administer additional present level assessments in areas like pragmatics. In the language samples section, there are suggested prompts, but if you have a favorite method for getting your student to talk to you, use that instead, and please share. In the comment section below, at the bottom of the present level assessment, I may write down some of the students' responses, and if it's a situation where I feel like I need to have a backup to interpret the information, I may record the conversation. But for the most part, I am going to go through the checklist while the student is chatting and select a thumbs up for areas they do well in and flag areas of concern or areas where I want to collect more information. I can also make notes under each section if I want more data. I will then go through the narrative and picture description tasks to assess functional discourse and spontaneous language. Under the language sampling sections are subtests for a variety of language skills. Each subtest includes around 5 stimulus items in order to gather a quick snapshot of the student's ability. From start to finish, it typically takes me about 30 minutes to complete the 3rd through 5th grade present level assessment. Sometimes I break it up into small chunks and address each area for a few minutes during the student's regularly scheduled service time. Other times, I may work with the teacher to find a good time to pull the student out for 1 or 2 additional sessions. One of the most important but often overlooked parts of the assessment process is the classroom observation. This used to be something that I often skipped because I didn't have a method of collecting data that gave me any real value. With the classroom observation present level assessment, I have a step-by-step guide of everything I should be considering while I am sitting in the classroom, making me feel like a fly on the wall. I will say, this is a great task to delegate. If there is an aide in the classroom, that would be ideal. They would be able to complete the observation during different times in the day or during different activities, which can give you more data than if I just show up for one time for 30 minutes. This is also a great task to delegate if you are fortunate enough to have an SLPA. As the SLP, we need to analyze the data, but we don't have to be the only one that takes it. At this time, I may do additional testing if there are areas of concern where I need more data. One thing I look for is whether I flagged any major area of communication. For example, pragmatics, articulation, fluency, or voice. In Johnny's case, those are all identified as strengths. So that leads me to step 4. Determine which areas require targeted instruction. After completing the assessments, I now have a comprehensive summary of Johnny's unique communication strengths and needs. Now is the time where your clinical expertise and/or sometimes instinct comes in again. Johnny exhibited needs in 7 different skills. I'm obviously not going to write 7 goals. So what I need to determine is what skills require specific designed intervention that can only be provided by the SLP. Are there any skills that can be targeted by a goal or accommodation? And based on what the parent and teacher reported, are there areas that they find impact him the most? On the subtest for antonyms, Johnny scored 3 out of 5, which flagged the area as a need. But this is something we have been working on, and this may be more of an issue with his vocabulary than his ability to provide antonyms. He also had difficulty with idioms. Based on what I know about Johnny, I don't see difficulties in him being overly literal or missing nuances in language, so this is more likely due to a lack of exposure. Johnny struggles with context clues. So if his difficulty with antonyms and idioms is related to lack of exposure or vocabulary not being in his lexicon, I may get more bang for my buck by providing targeted intervention for context clues. Narrative comprehension was also flagged as an area of need, and Johnny mastered the goal to answer WH questions about a short story. And the story in the assessment was fairly short. When I go and look at that part of the assessment, I see that the questions he missed were main idea and prediction. Phew! He had correctly answered the questions that came straight from the passage, which we had been working on for over a year. There was only one example for main idea and prediction questions, so this is an area I want to speak with the teacher about, as well as collect more information on before I determine if these skills require a goal. Using sufficient detail, connecting events using transition words, and including story grammar elements are areas that I could target by working on story retell. This is something I had noted as an area of difficulty, and based on the information will definitely be an area I recommend that we target with a goal. Step 5, summarize the findings in the PLAAFP. So now I need to gather this information and document it in the present level section of the IEP. First, I copy the summary under the assessments and SLP Toolkit. Then I can either paste it in the notes section or directly into my district's IEP software. Next, I elaborate and turn the information into a narrative. In a pinch, I may just print out the IEP review and SLP Toolkit to take to the meeting if I don't have time to write everything up formally in the IEP prior to the meeting. Voila! The final product. Johnny is a sweet boy who comes to each session on time. I'm just kidding. Here it is for reals. Johnny exhibits communication strengths in the areas of pragmatics, articulation, and grammar and syntax. Johnny is able to sequence information in a logical order with smooth transitions, uses age-appropriate sentence length, and establishes and maintains reference when speaking. He is able to comprehend question forms. He is able to comprehend question forms, make inferences, exhibits ease of word retrieval, and understands, uses age-appropriate concepts, synonyms, multiple meaning words, and analogies. Johnny can provide similarities and differences of two concrete objects, describe an object with sufficient detail, exhibit problem-solving skills, and identify absurdities in a visual representation. During a story retell, Johnny included a beginning, middle, and an end, and can identify the gestalt of a picture scene. Johnny exhibits needs in the area of narrative retell and vocabulary. He has difficulty providing sufficient detail, connecting events using transition words, and including story grammar elements during a story retell. He also demonstrated some difficulties with antonyms, but it was likely due to the vocabulary rather than his ability to provide an antonym. Johnny was unable to explain the meaning of some common idioms, but this appears to be a lack of knowledge of the idiom rather than a difficulty with understanding figurative language. This is something that he will be exposed to in the curriculum and through books and movies. Johnny has some difficulty with using and understanding some specific age-appropriate vocabulary, as well as defining words using context clues. He also exhibits difficulty with identifying the main idea and making predictions about a text. The teacher that he works with for reading is currently working on these skills in a small group setting. Johnny doesn't volunteer information in the classroom setting. He will answer questions addressed to him, but doesn't often comment or participate in classroom discussions. So thinking back to why IEPs are more than just a paperwork hoop, how would you feel if this was your child? If you read the first version versus the final version, which would you prefer in your child's IEP? Which one tells us more of a story? Which one is going to ensure that wherever Johnny goes, he will get the best services possible because the receiving SLP will have the roadmap to do so? When I used to write vague IEPs, I would spend at least 30 minutes agonizing over what to write before coming up with the generic Johnny is a nice boy verbiage. But shifting this time to administering a PLA, not only does it do right by the child, it does right by you. You can feel confident in the IEP meeting. You will have data available to help you answer any tough questions that come up, and you will look super smart. It's truly a win-win.